This video is in the continuity of my current video on the relationship between order and chaos, tradition and modernity, Evola and Hegel, the Hyperboreans, and I will put a link to a song in the description by Prodigy, the Afro-American rapper, from the album The Hegelian Dialectic, The Spiritual War. And I will comment interesting passages from the writing or the speech Metapolitics and Occult Warfare by Greg Johnson. He says, from a white nationalist point of view, everything is getting worse politically, culturally, and racially. This is why so many white nationalists are attracted to traditionalism, which explains contemporary events in terms of the myth of that history moves in cycles. So the negative situation that whites are confronted with dialectically, conceptually produces their attraction towards traditionalism. And the purpose of this series of videos is to show the conceptual unity between modernity and tradition. And if tradition is that which is eternal, immovable, everlasting, it means that it can maintain its being, so to speak, even within modernity. So modernity has to be traditional, and tradition has to be modern in order for tradition to be really traditional. I will get into more explanation later. Historical agency is the preserve of tiny elites. Well, strictly speaking, history is shaped by a tiny elite of one, which is God. But God is more than one within himself, if I might make a speculative joke. So, yeah. Evola mentions the occult dimension of history, a backstage dimension where specific intelligences are at work. In the language of Hegel's philosophy, the specific intelligences at work in the occult backstage of history is what he calls reason. And for those who do not yet understand what Hegel means when he says reason or die Vernunft, is what we in our everyday consciousness understand when we say mystical or supernatural or insane, nonsensical. So the rational, in the sense vernünftig, contains within itself the verstandig, the moment of the understanding, as we call what we call rationality, but as aufgehoben, as superseded, as preserved and transcended. And the truth of history is mystical, and I will try to show that. And I've already made videos about Hyperborea in which I try to set my viewers into the intellectual mood, the proper state of mind to be able to receive speculative insights. Metapolitics deals with the underlying causes and conditions of political change. When we enter the realm of causes and conditions, we are in the realm of logic. So one has to study speculative logic in order to understand the full depth of these Reflexionsbestimmungen, these determinations of reflection. Metapolitics operates on two levels, intellectual and organizational. And by organization, he means moral systems, religions, collective identities, tribal, national, racial, which is a mixture of determination of subjective spirit in the realm of psychology and anthropology, objective spirit in the realm of morality, and absolute spirit in the realm of religion. So the ideas are there, they just need to be systematically and conceptually organized. The concept of occult warfare is the traditionalist contribution to what is generally derided as conspiracy theories, including both history and speculation regarding secret societies. To conspire means a movement of spirit or spirits towards a same purpose, a same goal. And reality, what we call reality, is a self-moving process of spirit. So reality is a conspiracy. And the purpose that spirit is aiming at is to have a self-knowledge of himself. That's why he's conspiring against himself, I guess. Not a day goes by when my colleagues and I do not conspire together to advance the agenda of the North American New Right. And not a day goes by when our enemies do not conspire to advance their agenda. In the language of Hegel's philosophy, it means that Greg Johnson and his political opponents are moments in the process of the self-unfolding becoming conscious of itself, of spirit. So Greg Johnson and his opponents are moments in the development of spirit, becoming conscious of himself. So yeah. The occult war is carried on by secret initiatic societies, but with the advent of the internet and the easier access to an infinite library of books, the secrets are becoming revealed, so to speak. Both tradition and subversion are based upon bodies of eternal principles that must be propagated over time through a process of initiation. The purpose of my videos is to show the conceptual unity of tradition and anti-tradition, which we call modernity or decadence, if one wishes, or subversion. That tradition is the self-negating process of itself, and this is an eternally negating process whose purpose is to re-establish its own truth, to re-establish tradition, because it is in the concept of tradition to eternally re-establish itself. And what we call the process of initiation is the movement of consciousness, which is both collective and individual, that minds enter into in order to reconstruct tradition. And this process of reconstruction of tradition, which presupposes that tradition has been deconstructed, is the very process of tradition. That's what I will try to develop with logical ideas in the next video. The metaphysical foundations and practical aims of a secret order are as fixed and unchanging as being itself. There's this view in the so-called traditionalist spiritual circles that being is immovable and becoming is the realm of change and appearance. But a very easy reflection upon being shows that being itself is nothing, and that because it is the opposite of itself, because pure being is pure nothing, so it is its own difference within itself, that being ceases to be what it is, and be is what it is not, and the process of being what one is not, and passing from being into non-being or non-being into being, this is what we call becoming. And being is fundamentally unstable, and that's why being becomes. And to oppose being and becoming is to be trapped within the very early ontotheological moments of Hegel's logic. And Hegel showed that the entire process of logic, which is the process of God, seeks to re-establish the primordial stability of being, which was an illusion, a delusion, because being was nothing and therefore it was dialectically unstable. And the whole process of becoming, the logical unfolding of categories, consists in trying to re-establish a primordial unity which did not exist. So that's quite complex, but with a little bit of speculative reasoning, it makes sense. Truth and order may employ lies and chaos. That's a very speculative idea, that the opposites reciprocally need one another in order to develop themselves. The promulgation of materialistic and positivistic prejudices about historical causation blinds the intelligent to the occult dimension of history. This is what, in Hegel's language, is meant by verstandig view, which means the view of the understanding, der Verstand, of history, which sees history as a chronological process bringing forth consciousness and human activity, whereas a vernunftig view of history presupposes that consciousness is the first cause of being, and that consciousness projects retroactively its own history backward in time. So to think vernunftig, to think in a speculative manner, means to abolish time in a sense. He talks about the counter-tradition, but I will try to show logically in my next video, but I have already had glimpses about it, that tradition is or becomes the counter-tradition of itself, and that this counter-tradition is the very being of tradition, because it means that tradition remains what it is even when it falls into modernity or decadence or anti-tradition, and this precisely this ability to maintain one's being through change and becoming is tradition, that which is eternal and unmoving in its own self-movement. That's quite complex, but it requires a little bit of speculative thinking, but there are profound ideas that I share. Decline can actually be seen as a kind of progress, for things cannot get better until decline has run its course. That's a very Hegelian idea, that when errors have been made, truth, or a higher truth, dialectically emerges from past errors. That's what he calls the path of the negative. And I will quote a passage from Hegel's Logic, which says that the very process of logic, which for those who do not yet know is the self-unfolding process of the emergence of all the logical categories and the laws of thought, the rules of logic, how they emerge from being, which is nothing, and form a self-sustaining, self-moving, self-enclosed totality, which contains all the wealth of thought. And he says, it must be admitted that it is an essential consideration, one which will be found elaborated again within the logic itself, that progression, to move forward, is a retreat to the ground, to the foundation, to the origin and the truth on which that with which the beginning was made. The movement returns as to its ground. So to progress in the realm of Hegel's logic is to regress towards the origin. That's why the reactionary are the true progressives, and the progressives are regressive agents, and they both work in a conceptual unity. Guenon does not merely claim that we ought to resist the Dark Age, but that resistance already exists. And Greg Johnson is a moment in the resistance against the Dark Age. He thinks that there is a resistance outside of himself, whereas he himself is a moment of resistance. And all the authors that have inspired his writings, they are resistance. For Guenon, there is an equilibrium. It is the result of the simultaneous action of two contrary tendencies, which in the realm of being are being and nothing, identity and difference, positive and negative. I will develop on these two logical determinations in my next video, but the dialectical interaction between these contradictory forces is that which brings forth movement and change and evolution, and the purpose is to attain balance. And for the two terms of an opposition have no meaning apart from one another. The opposite of an opposite is what it is to the extent that it is not what it is not. So it has its being in its other, in a conceptual unity. Progress and regression, tradition and modernity, the Dark Age and the Golden Age, they are in a conceptual unity, and I will logically comment on Hegel's logic. Guénon's point is that all realities are comprised of opposed forces in equilibrium. There are Dark Age currents and Golden Age countercurrents, and the publishing house of Greg Johnson is titled Countercurrents because he's swimming against the current, so he is himself the resistance, and he's a movement in a process of the self-abolition of the Dark Age, because the Dark Age dialectically creates the will to enlighten itself, which brings forth the Golden Age, the Age of Enlightenment. There cannot be any absolute discontinuity between the Kali Yuga and the coming Golden Age, meaning that they exist within the same causal nexus, so that things we do now will affect the Golden Age to come. So writing this book, which is probably a transcription of a speech, is an action which has brought, as a consequence, by the influence it has had upon the many readers and the thoughts that it has brought forth in the mind of those who have carefully read or listened, it has affected the coming into being of the Golden Age and the abolition of the Dark Age. Then he quotes Savitri Devi and saying that she embraced Hinduism because it was the only religion in the world that is compatible with National Socialism. And Hegel says that history is rational and it is religious, and religion is philosophical. So in order to make National Socialism philosophical, namely to give a rational, in a sense of Hegel, explanation of the unfolding of National Socialism, one must give a Hegelian view of history, and it includes within itself Hinduism, and it must be incorporated within Hegel's philosophy. And this incorporation of post-Hegelian thinkers, systems, philosophers, events, is cultural Hegelianism. We can rest assured that Eastern masters, a kind of League of Shadows, perhaps, are waging the occult war on our behalf. Otherwise, the Dark Age, which is not chaos, but a kind of negative order, would have given way to complete chaos long ago. So he says that chaos is the negative of order, and order is the positive of chaos, so they are in a conceptual unity with one another. One cannot think of the positive without the negative, and a chaotic state of being or a chaotic state of mind dialectically and conceptually brings forth the will to order, and when order is re-established, the forces of chaos and dissolution emerge and try to abolish the established order. And these two determinations interact with one another in a dialectical process in the realm of politics, but also in the realm of logic and nature also. And Greg Johnson is a profoundly speculative man, and the fact that he mentions the League of Shadow as an embodiment of modern pop culture in the Batman series proves that he is already a cultural Hegelian. He just needs to be reminded of his place within the grand scheme of things. There is no vast right-wing conspiracy, but perhaps there should be. But he's part of this right-wing conspiracy. He said earlier, I quoted the passage, that he was actively working as a conspirator every day to promote the resistance against the decline. So he's a conspirator. He just doesn't know who the planner is, but maybe we'll find out someday. But he says that if Guenon is right, such a secret order already exists. They have to come to you. So the only thing you can do is focus on making yourself worthy of being chosen by such an elite group. And maybe someday Greg Johnson will be chosen by an elite group of traditionalist revolutionaries, spiritual revolutionaries, whose purpose would be to bring about the restoration of the Golden Age. Sometimes, he says, the best way to keep your secrets is not to make a great show of concealing them. This is why secret societies deny that they are secret. I am not a secret society, and my conspiracy is not a secret because I am revealing all my plans in broad daylight on the internet. Anyone can watch these. There are potentially 4 billion viewers who can watch my plot unfolding. So I'm not a very good conspirator. I'm not very smart, I guess. He says that today's white nationalist movement might work best on the model of a Montessori school. That's one of the funniest jokes I've ever read. This is so comical that... most people who call themselves traditionalists today have not undergone a process of initiation in some sort of secret order. Instead, we largely work alone, reading the increasingly abundant and easily accessible corpus of traditionalist literature. But what he does not understand is that this process of working alone, this process of self-initiation, this process of self-inquiry, self-seeking, is the initiation. This is the phenomenology of spirit. It's the process of consciousness seeking to re-establish the primordial lost identity, and consciousness does not even know what it has lost, but it is seeking to re-establish the primordial unity. So, the first basic principles of his movement are that we lay our foundations in the eternal. We have a firm place for us to stand while we rearrange the rest of the world to suit us. This is the idea that spirit shall shape the world in a way. The lever by which we will move the world is the pursuit of intellectual and cultural hegemony. And the purpose of cultural Hegelianism is to conquer the world in thought and in spirit through intellectual and cultural hegemony. So, that's what I had to say. So that was just a brief introduction, and I will drink a cup of coffee because I'm kind of tired. And I will make a video that I wanted to make about the view of Evola and Hegel and modern pop culture on the relationship between tradition and modernity, positive and negative, opposition and harmony and hyperborea. So, yeah.